In this video, we will configure security policies to filter based on the URL that our users may enter when accessing websites on the internet. This deals with web filtering and blocking websites that are not appropriate. Now, before we begin, there's currently no URL filtering enabled. When we go to our user computer that is on our network, we can access any particular site, like social networking sites like facebook.com, okay, so we're connected, and even twitter.com. You can access that as well, including sites like Happy Tree Friends. Now, this is a site that has violent material that is not suitable to be viewed in a business environment. And there it is. So we need to set up a web filtering policy that can block websites that we think are not appropriate. Before we do that, we need to enable that feature on our firewall. So let's go to the features page. Okay, and under security features, we will enable web filter, which is right here at the bottom. And we're also going to enable a feature called multiple security policies, which is right here. And doing that, this will allow us to create different type of web filter or application profiles with different restrictions for different groups, which we'll be using and setting up in this series. Once we are done, we will apply our changes. To configure a web filtering profile, we need to go to Security Profiles and select it as Web Filter. So this will show the default profile that we can definitely use. And the two main aspects of a web filtering profile is the inspection mode and the FortiGuard category shown here. For the inspection mode, you can select proxy, flow-based, or DNS. The most common two modes that are used is proxy and flow-based. So inspection based on DNS means that only the DNS name of the site will be used in the inspection process. Proxy means that for every website that a user accesses, the contents of that site will be locally stored on the firewall to provide deeper inspection. In return, the FortiGuard is acting as a proxy between the website that a user is accessing and the user system itself, acting as a type of middleman. Using proxy is very good if you want to issue warning pages to a user when accessing a certain web category that can provide other customized options. Where flow-based means that the firewall is looking at the active session or the flow through the firewall, and it is blocking based on the category. But in this particular mode for flow-based, it does not allow you to do any custom options like enabling a warning page to your users. The second component that is important is the various web categories. Some of these categories include potentially liable, adult mature, bandwidth consuming, and much more. Under those main categories are subcategories like this under potentially liable. It can include child abuse, drug abuse, and so forth. Under, let's say, bandwidth consuming category, some of the web categories include internet telephony, internet radio, and TV, and so forth. So let's say that we want to block or provide a warning for any social networking site, for example. To do that, let's first go to General Interest Personal, and let's go down to Social Networking, which contains Facebook and Twitter, among other sites. So for any category or subcategory like social networking, we can have different filter options when we click on them. Let's go ahead and do that now for social networking. And so for one, we can allow websites for that category to pass unfiltered. We can block websites. We can simply monitor and keep track of what our users are doing without any restrictions. We can also issue a warning page. Now, this does not effectively work in FortiOS version 5.2 since the Fortinet has made some big changes with the certificates and the CA on the firewall unit. So just keep that in mind, that we will not be using warnings because it's not an effective solution. It doesn't work very well. It's even confirmed from the support team. we'll be focusing on either allowing or blocking particular categories. And of course, there are other options here that include authenticate and other customizations. So selecting allow or block is the most common choices in most environments. So this is a very common question that I often get from customers, engineers, and consultants. And that is, how do you know which category a particular website belongs to? Well, you can determine that by, let's go to System here on the FortiGate. And here under Config, you need to go to FortiGuard. And let's go to the very bottom of this page. Okay. And there you need to extend out web filtering and email filtering options. Then let's click on this link here. And here we can type in the website that we want to check for its corresponding category. So let's type in something like twitter.com. Let's go ahead and verify this. Say submit. Oh, let's try that one more time. You gotta love these wonderful verification tools. All right, much better. So here it says social networking. So that makes sense. Twitter is a social networking website. Let's try another website, for example. So let's go ahead and go back into that. And let's try our Happy Tree Friends website, because this is the kind of site that we want to block. And let's verify. And that says explicit violence is the category for this site. Therefore, I can use that information for blocking certain categories, and this will be one of the categories that we do want to block in our environment. Now let's go back to the web filtering page. What we would do is create a new web filter profile that will work in our environment. To do that, we will click here on this little plus symbol. Then we're going to specify the following. We're going to first enter a name for this web filter profile that will be used for our employees. I'll call this employees. For the inspection mode, we will leave it at proxy. Next, we will enable categories. And here we want to block the web category called explicit violence, which contains the website that we confirmed, which is happytreefriends.com. And that is located under potentially liable. And doing that, well, technically, everything here does not look appropriate either. So we actually will block all of these subcategories. So let's go ahead and go to potentially liable, and let's block them and the subcategories. We will also block the adult and mature category and all of those particular subcategories as well. Okay, but we will allow Facebook access to our users for now, but that will later change. So right now, social networking, that subcategory is being allowed. Now we can block other categories as needed, but we will now go ahead and apply our changes for this new profile. Let's also block bandwidth consuming websites like YouTube in our environment. Let's do that as well. So we'll go ahead and select all these sites and let's block them. Okay, and let's go ahead and apply our changes again. Because we selected the proxy inspection mode, the FortiGate will act as a proxy for our users when accessing websites as it does its inspection process to determine if the site should be blocked or allowed. Well, this proxy is an actual feature, and those details are located here under Policy Objects and for Proxy Options. So this shows the default profile that will proxy traffic based on these particular port numbers here that are listed here. And of course, it includes HTTP, which applies to users accessing websites that we want to be filtered. So there's nothing here that needs to be done, but we will use this default proxy profile with our web filtering profile when we apply it to our security policy. You'll also see that using a proxy profile, it will be required and that we cannot unselect it unless you want to inspect using Flowbase. So you will see that when we enable this within our policy. Let's now set up a security policy that will filter based on the URL. And to do that, let's go back to our policy page, which is right here. And let's edit this existing policy, allowing access out to the internet from our user and server networks. Okay, so here under security profiles, we will enable web filtering with this policy for providing additional security that we want to enforce. Now, when we do that, proxy options appears automatically and it is selected by default. This is the default profile that we just saw and what we will use. You will also see that SSL inspection automatically becomes enabled as well. And we'll talk about this further in the next video topic. Now for the web filtering, we want to select the web filter profile for employees that we manually created to enforce the details that we just set up. And we are done with our changes, so we will save. And now we see that web filtering has been applied to that particular policy. Now let's go ahead and test this out. So let's go back to our user computer and let's try to access happytreefriends.com again, and let's see what happens. Okay, and doing that, we get blocked as we get a block page provided by the FortiGate firewall. Now this page will show our IP address, the website that we're trying to access, including the category that this site belongs to. Now, if we try to go to youtube.com, let's go ahead and try that out. That also gets blocked because it is a streaming media website that was listed under the bandwidth consuming category that we also wanted to block. Now, social networking sites is allowed, but when we go to, let's say, twitter.com, here's what happens. Okay, so we get connected, but since Twitter is a secure website, we get an untrusted connection or a security warning. Now we're getting this page because when we enabled web filter, it also enabled proxy options, including SSL inspection, whether we want it or not. Well, when that happened, it automatically forced our firewall to decrypt and inspect all HTTPS web pages. Now this operation is important. So in order for the FortiGate to know whether to block or allow a website, so if the website is secure, like twitter.com, it needs to decrypt it, inspect it, then make its decision for how that session should be handled. So therefore, we got more work to do. And the next video, we're going to cover SSL decryption services on the FortiGate firewall and how we can get our users' web browsers to trust what our firewall is doing.